What's up, everybody? Welcome to iMixandMaster.com. First of all, I want to say thanks to everybody watching the videos. I did a kick drum, how to mix a kick drum video. I apologize, it was a little shallow. I'm going to go in depth on this one and explain to you the frequencies I'm using to get that killer kick drum sound. The first loop pack we did was more of a filler kind of kicks where you would layer it with other kicks, and I had that in mind, so it didn't have the sharp attack. These kind of kick drums that I'm doing now could be used soloing out. A lot of guys layer kicks, but these kind of kicks would be more than efficient just by themselves. I'm going to go through the EQ process of what I'm doing in my mind, and I'm going to go through the dynamic control process with two different compressors. This is a killer chain. If you're going to buy one of the kick drum kits, I'd highly recommend this one. I'd recommend all of them. They're all cool. But this one, we're using the Massive Passive, we're using the MU, and then we are going through the two liquid channels. Another thing we're going to be adding to the studio is the SSL X-Rack. We're going to be able to sum mixes for people out there, and I'll get into that. But the other thing we're going to do is save up for the G-Bus compressor, which I'm using on the liquid channel as a replication. Anything that replicates something else is not it, but you know, some of these are really close. This liquid channel does it to a T. And I actually took this liquid channel head-to-head against the Manley MU, the real deal, and to this day I still can't tell the difference after I posted it on SoundCloud. So I don't even know which one was which. So yeah, good job, Focusrite. We're going to get into this. So let's scroll back down to the EQ, and I'll go one by one through the bands, and I'll explain to you how this EQ works. So if you're a Massive Passive or you love gear, we'll explain that too. The Massive Passive has 4 bands. Each 4 band can either be a bell or it can be a shelf. In the case of using it on individual instruments, right now I'm using it as a bell. The reason I'm using it as a bell is because I want to surgically take out some of the frequencies and in a sense add more energy to other frequency ranges. Why the Massive Passive and EQs like this are, you know, a little more expensive and just produce and yield a better result is the way they're built. It's the functionality of some of the greatest engineers, technical engineers out there, creating and putting their brains together and creating EQs that stand the test of time. There's a reason we pay money for them, and we're offering this, you know, for like $12.95. You get a bundle full of X amount of kick drums that we process. So let's get into how I'm doing it. It's not the same for everyone, but for this kick drum it was, and I'm going to explain that. It's the same as mastering. There's no same preset that you can constantly use. The 220 right here is in cut mode. The reason I'm cutting about 4.5 decibels with a broad bandwidth. More frequencies are getting affected. The reason being is the 220 range is a real warming range, and with the wrong equipment and digital, it becomes really muffled. And whether you can use a multi-band to control that if you want that in the recording, but in a kick drum situation, a lot of the kicks that I'm aiming towards are more pop and dance and hip hop. And how do I get that kick drum sound? We're trying to create that for you, and we are. So the 220 range, we're going to cut that. The reason we're cutting it is so we can give more energy to another range. Audio is a weird thing. When you take away something, actually something else becomes more present. Over the years, I've learned if you take away 220 and add 120, you're going to get that round defined sound that a lot of guys miss. And when we're mixing vocals to a kick drum, a lot of times I'll mix the vocals energy to the energy of the kick drum so it doesn't sound out of place. So the more energy your kick drum has to start, the more energy you can, in a sense, master your vocal to, or mix your vocal. Right here, the second band, like I said, I boosted 120. A little bit more of a tight bandwidth, so we're not affecting, you know, into the 80 hertz, 90 hertz, stuff like that. We're really in the 100 hertz, 120, and we're boosting around, you know, 2 dBs. With this EQ, the 2 dBs makes a huge difference, by the way. It's very transparent, but if you listen to it long enough, you understand why they use this kind of stuff for mastering. We can do a lot of change with little audio effect, I guess, where some plugins you boost just a tad or you boost a lot to get the same result. The cut feature on here is at 1K. A lot of people don't understand on a kick drum there is higher end frequencies that are playing in the role of that sound. So a lot of times you'll have this killer kick going here, but then you ruin it up top because it's just really not fun to listen to, and it becomes annoying, and it's got too much of a click to it. But there is an attack or a snap of the kick drum. You know, if you're listening to like the beater on the kick drum, you want to have some of that present in the sound itself. So, but we want to control it to where 120 is more of the dominating in this particular kick. So we cut 1K and a lot of the frequencies around it. So a lot of the higher mids into the real high mids we wanted to cut. The next thing we have a cut control on, and it might be different for the next sample. It just depends on the sample. But we're cutting 5K. 5K really is a attack range. But one of the things in mastering that I've learned over the years, when I'm boosting something dramatically to change volume, the thing is things that you didn't hear stick out more. So if we want to get these kicks hitting 0 at RMS of -6, where this kick came to me earlier and it was nowhere near that level, I'm going to start hearing things come out that I wouldn't have normally heard. And I think a lot of newer mastering engineers or guys that claim to master music, and you know, everybody is out here trying to make a living. Don't get me wrong here, but you'll boost something with like an L2 or something, and then you'll listen back to it and you'll be like, well, why does it sound all like squashed? It's because you didn't EQ it proper before it hit the compressor. So now we have that going on. We have a low shelf, a low pass, and a high pass, and that's just getting rid of information I don't need in these kick drums. So once we have all this together, we're going to send it to the next stage, and I'll explain that to you, to really, really control the boost that I'm doing. So up here we go to the liquid channels. The liquid channels are a piece that Focusrite came out with that can actually replicate all kinds of infamous compressors. It is one of those pieces that a lot of guys go, well, why don't you just buy the real thing? Well, if I bought the real thing of everything that's in that box, I could not afford to do this video. The thing is, though, is I've put this up to pieces that are the real thing that I'm fortunate to use, and to this day, that piece of equipment does the job, and it does it in a way, it has its own little sound, and I really like the sound of the liquid channel. It adds that hi-fi that the Bax does. It adds a dimension that the original piece didn't, and it does what the original piece does, and if you use it correctly and you know what you're doing, you can get the same results. But you have to know what you're doing. So we're going to explain to you what I'm doing. I know it's getting blurry here. I apologize about this camera, but I'm going to show you, by pointing out what knob is what. This is my threshold. This is my attack. This is my ratio. This is my attack. This is my release. To get that infamous pop style kick in your face, a lot of attack time that everybody wants. This was the demand that people were asking for on Loop Gurus. What I'm doing is this -21 threshold depends on, we're really hitting it heavy. But what we're doing here to be able to hit it heavy without pumping, so we have a 4:1 ratio, a 30 millisecond attack time. That is the key to making that kick the way it is. A lot of guys think, well, let's do a 0.1 attack. We want it to really grab it. No, you want that kick to be able to breathe for the first initial part of the sound. The next thing is you want it to release at 100. So you want it to release quick, but you want that dynamic control to happen. Once that happens, it's going to give it that wow factor, that kick, that real snap to it. And that can be done with the SSL bus compressor. And I think that's one of the best pieces to do that infamous kick that just sounds very fantastic. The last kick drum kit I didn't do that with. I just did more, neutral sounding kicks. So this is going to be a standalone kick drum kit. And then finally, after it runs through that, it goes to the Manley MU. The Manley MU is going to add that warmth after that punch. And I have that in low pass. I have it with a high pass side chain where it lets the lows come through. So it lets the low end hit, and it gives it the snap up top. And it's very even, and it's really defined. Before I process the kick, it doesn't sound anything like that. So let's see if I can do a process, and I'll tell you something about processing in the box too. So that's with it on. This is with it off. Very, very dull sounding. If you mix to that, your mix is going to sound dull. To this, your mix is going to have light. That's a huge difference, because as an engineer I hear the frequency change, and I hear everything become balanced. If I don't do that, and let's just put it this way, if you're a new mixing engineer and you mix to the prior one before it's processed, you're going to get a dull mix, because you're going to mix your vocals to that. You're going to mix your everything that you have is going to be mixed around that. But if you do the processing like I just did, and then you start mixing around that, you'll notice you'll start bringing life to your vocals. You'll start bringing, a little more snap, and everything sounds like it's meant to be. So yeah, that's what we do at Loop Gurus. We try to get sounds that we can process individually. Some instruments are very hard to process individually, because, we don't know if that's the way you wanted it to sound. But kick drums, snares, samples off of vinyls, hi-hats, stuff like that, some synth parts we can do. So yeah, that's what we're focusing in on. So that is how we get it. I do want to mention one thing about processing like this. If you're all plug-in based, don't worry about it. But in this case, we have to add space to the front to make the compressor work different, which is really interesting. We're actually letting it do like a look ahead, so we're using the space as almost an instrument here, which you'll probably never hear anybody say that, but this space in the front, which is dead space that I added, as I continue to add it as it's processing, the compressor changes the way that it works with the sound. So I can add just enough space to compensate for any kind of, latency issues that happen with software, processing something in this small of a time frame. And then we're actually adding the exact space to let that compressor do its job, so the attack and release hits exactly where we want it to hit. And it took me a long time to be able to listen like this, but this is what creates professional albums. Last thing, mastering in our studio can be done, and I just did an album in 2.5, 3 hours for a guy, and he was loving it. So we can make that happen. But mixing, on the other hand, is doing this kind of stuff to your whole entire song. It costs more because it takes more time. The results can be a lot better. If you like your mix, send us your master. If you don't like your mix, send us parts of it, and we'll work with your budget. Because if we just do that to your drum kit, imagine doing what I'm doing to your drum kit, and then mix your song around that drum kit. Because I think that and the bass is the number one thing that guys always fight with their vocals. Bass, drums, vocals. It's always that. Anytime I talk to anybody on the phone, nobody ever says, oh, my piano sounds bad. Nobody ever says that. So, bottom line, we have seeked out to make an investment in using the gear we have. Thank God for the gear. Thank God for the experience. And we just want to make the best music possible, and we want to make it affordable to people. So you get to use this kind of gear, and we'll continue to grow the gear. And that's my video on kick drums. So I hope you like it.